And I
Okay.
want to welcome you,
Okay.
ma'am, Jackie March of Loveland, Colorado. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Jessica Schneider with the Loveland Voice, the only women-led online news magazine based in Loveland, Colorado. And this is interview 3 of 3 for now, about the impact of URAs, metro districts, and now we're going to talk about the master finance agreement. And I know it's all so complicated, and I know you spent a lot of time figuring this out. And so I'm really grateful that you are here to help us understand a little bit more about what's happening. So my first question is, just so that people get an idea about, like, for me, for instance, when I hear the word or the acronym MFA, I think that has nothing to do with me. Right? But I think it does have something to do with all of us. So could you, in a few comments, like, just let our audience know why they should care and why they should understand about the master finance agreement?
Yeah, and that is what it stands for. MFA is Master Finance Agreement. It's an agreement, and I'm just going to read the people. I brought it with me. Master Finance Agreement. It is it's an agreement between the City of Loveland, the Loveland Urban Renewal Authority, which currently is all made up of the council members, the Centerra Properties West LLC, which you'll see as CPW is how you frequently see it, in documents, but that's the Centerra Properties West, the Centerra Metro District number 1, the Centerra Public Improvement Collection Corporation, and the Centerra Public Improvement Development Corporation. Those last two are nonprofits that receive and hold the money that's collected. The PIC, as it's known, PIC, is kind of the name for the nonprofit entity that receives the public improvement fee that's charged on purchases in Centerra. So when you go to, say, Macy's and you buy something there, you're going to pay all the regular taxes to the county. You're going to, what is that, 0.08, I think. The state is 2.9%. Normally, the City of Loveland charges 3%, but in this agreement, we agreed to drop our 3% to 1.75%. So the city only collects 1.75%. And then per this agreement, we allowed Centerra to charge 1.25% public improvement fee.
And when did that start? And how long does it go for?
So the agreement is 2004. I think Centerra, probably the promenade shops were probably built 2005. I believe it probably started collecting in 2005, 2006. So the PIC, as it's known, is just kind of where all the monies are paid into. So having had a small business, I would have to do my sales reports to the county and the city every month. So mine would be, how much do I owe? How much did I collect and do I owe to the county, to the state, and the City of Loveland? If you're a business owner in one of the Centerra stores, you have those as well, but then you have to add another category for public improvement fee. So they had to collect that. That's part of the master finance agreement. What's not in the master finance agreement is there is another 1% fee that's called the retail sales fee. And that's another fee that they charge on purchases inside Centerra, but it was not part of the master finance agreement.
So how does that work? Where did that come from?
So there are 2 covenants that run with the land. One is public improvement fee and one is retail sales fee. Both of those documents and covenants indicate it runs with the land, which means even if you took down a store and put up another one, it would run with the land. It would apply to the new one. Both of those indicate those run until 2094. But the master finance agreement indicates, first of all, it does not include the retail sales fee. It's not mentioned in the master finance agreement. What is mentioned is the public improvement fee of 1.25%, and it says it ends in 2029. The master finance agreement sunsets in 20, I'm saying that wrong, in 2029. The master finance agreement ends. According to the master finance agreement, the public improvement fee ends in 2029. So it's kind of in conflict with that covenant that says 2094.
Right. So do you know like how that conflict is there a resolution that is understood, or is this totally just like we're just trying to figure it out right now?
I think it's questions to be asked, and I know one of the requests is that we amend the master finance agreement that's currently for Centerra 1 through 5 districts, metro districts 1 through 5. And then if they're successful in pulling out the 150 acres and creating a new URA with the South Centerra, I believe they plan to ask for a new master finance agreement for that particular, what would become a separate.
So can you, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so what the master finance agreement is a huge agreement. It's been amended, I believe, at least 7 times. It covers things like the debt. It gets very entangled because you have the urban renewal plan, which has like regional improvements, I-25-34, and then you have local improvements and you have metro improvements. And so the master finance agreement kind of touches on all of those. So at the end of the day, the debt remaining is going to come down to pretty much the commercial properties inside the Centerra 1 through 5 districts. That will be the ongoing burden. There will be some residential, but not what we typically think of single family homes and stuff. So this agreement kind of covers, like local improvements. I'm just going to read this.
Sure.
Shall mean and refer to all streets, roads, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, all stormwater drainage, retention, detention, swales, canals, ditches, ponds, lakes, dams, and other stormwater systems and facilities, potable and non-potable irrigation systems, facilities, all water, sewer, gas, electric, telephone, television, communication, utilities, facilities, landscaping within public right-of-way, public easement, publicly dedicated or owned real estate, parks, amenities, recreation trails, open spaces. It kind of goes on. Centerra's accumulating a lot of debt. And then it's like, who is going to pay it when the master finance agreement expires in 2029? And in theory, that public improvement fee of 1.25% ends. Also in 2029, the URA ends. And the URA is what sends all of the diverted property tax from the school district, from the county, from the city of Loveland, from the special districts like the health and mosquito pest, all of that stops flowing to Centerra through the LURA. So,
okay, this is again, I'm going to ask dumb questions. I'm good.
Please do. I mean, it'll help probably bring out the answers. And I don't by any means think that I have all the documents yet. Yeah. I continuously find something else that I'd never heard of.
That's so wild.
And nobody's ever sat down with me and explained this. So it's kind of like core request. And I Google like some of the 2004 agreements, the resolutions that were presented to council. And so you don't know if some of those changed along the way. Yeah, I have no confidence that I have all the documents or all the information at this point.
Well, you saying that, I'm going to switch my line of questioning. Who does have all of those documents at hand that does not have to make a core request, that does not have to do all of the extra work that you're doing to try to like paint a picture that's clear for our community? Who has that?
Well, obviously I would assume Centerra and Pinnacle, which is their accounting company. And I would think our city manager and city attorney, I would think would have all of that.
Is
It's
there a reason that isn't forthcoming? That isn't something that like the Office of Communication and Engagement hasn't made, just public for anyone to peruse? Is there a reason for that?
um, I don't have an answer for that. I honestly don't. It's a lot of documents. If you start doing Google searches, you can come up with some of the documents that were presented in the 2004 meetings to city council. So some of what I have, in fact, here's one, resolution R-8-2004, resolution of the city council approving the US 34 Crossroads Corridor Renewal Plan. So this is when they were declaring this, blighted land that would become the URA for, the Centerra URA. You have these different requirements that the boundaries of the urban renewal plan have been drawn narrowly. So many days have passed, public notice. Well, section 11 is kind of interesting because it says that to the extent the urban renewal area is made up solely of open or vacant land that will only be developed for non-residential uses, the city council hereby finds, based on all the evidence presented at the hearing, that such non-residential uses are necessary and appropriate to facilitate the proper growth and development of the community in accordance with sound planning standards, and it goes on. So if I go back and I review those original documents and the things that came before city council, it was very clear that the concept was this was going to be a mostly commercial development. The original Promenade Mall was called a lifestyle center, which back in 2004 meant an upscale shopping mall, usually placed in affluent neighborhoods, aimed at high-end shoppers. And then through negotiation, and as the lifestyle centers were defined back in 2004, 2005, it was more boutique shopping. During the process, it looks like of council accepting this and working this out with Centerra, they insisted that there be some large box retailers, which is probably how, the bookstore and Best Buys and Macy's came to be, because that would not have been in the definition of a lifestyle center back then. Outdoor park-like settings, upscale restaurants and shops. So when they hired the company that developed that mall, that's what their specialty was, lifestyle centers.
And it seems like that's kind of what, sorry to interrupt, but that's kind of what Kinston, the new Kinston neighborhood, is being sort of marketed as a lifestyle center. Is that a correct interpretation?
They're not really so much of a shopping mall, but if you think about Whole Foods perception as kind of more of an upscale, that would kind of fit with this, that's kind of the concept of it. But when you look at those original discussions and meetings, and somewhere I have it in this pile of papers, I believe it was somewhere between 70 and 90% of the land was supposed to be commercial.
And what is it now?
Let's see, there's only, I think, 337 acres, I think, developed. It was supposed to have, I think, what was it, 10 million in commercial development square footage, and it's at 3.5 or something.
Wow.
By now, the sales tax revenue, the city's portion at 1.75% should be like 8.8 million. We're at about 4.4, 4.5. We were supposed to have 18,000 non-retail jobs. So again, it was supposed to be kind of a lot of commercial development, upscale shopping. It was supposed to be a lot of high-paying jobs. So it didn't work out that way, and not to blame anybody. What I come away with from some of this is that to enter into a 25-year agreement when nobody can predict the future. You had kind of the housing crash of 2007, 2008, floods, COVID, internet. So when you think about, some of the debt that's being incurred is supposed to be repaid by the public improvement fee, that 1.25% that's charged. The last few years when I've gone into Centerra, shopping for a Christmas gift or something for a family member, it's not uncommon at all that I hear one of the sales rep telling another customer, well, go online. You can find the tall version, or you can find this color, or you can find, we have limited stock here, go online. And I'm sure that it kind of works for them economically. I mean, more just to have people buy online. But what that means is, the city has done a pretty good job of making sure we get our sales tax, our online sales. So that's good for us because we would get 3%, not 1.75. But for Centerra, who has incurred all this debt, they don't get their 1.25% on a catalog or an internet sale. They lose that. So when you think about, here's this concept and you're going to incur all this debt for, in theory, public improvements, when you take that portion of the sales out, and there are a number of vacancies at Promenade and the Centerra Marketplace. And I think we just heard that Bed Bath and Beyond is closing. So you have, I believe the debt, last spring, they came in and asked for another 18.8 million. I believe the debt at that time was 200 or 209 million. I've just been reading the bond documents. They actually ended up borrowing another 25 million. So that's on top of that 200 or 209. And a lot of this money goes away. It's about, if I look at the loan documents, I think it's about 9 million that currently is coming in through Lura that will go away.
Okay.
And then
Can we pause for a minute just so I can try
yeah,
to.
I know it's complicated.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So when you say they're in debt for that much, they're in debt to the city of Loveland. Is that no?
No,
Who are they in debt
no,
to?
it's the bondholders. For me, the loan documents are some of the most informative material you can find. Is if you think about, Centerra communicating to potential, lenders, here is where we're at. We have this much revenue today, but these things expire in 2029. This is what's going to be ongoing, after that expires. So it kind of lays it out. But what it comes down to is, the commercial property owners inside Centerra are going to have a pretty, in my opinion anyway, a pretty heavy lift to pay off all that debt. Now, how much did they pay off between now and then? I don't know.
Okay.
But we seem to be accumulating more debt versus going down in the amount of debt. I'm looking for the piece of paper here on the loan documents. I have too many pieces of paper. That's part of the problem.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot to go through.
There is,
Yeah.
and again, the master finance agreement is, in some ways, it kind of pulls it together. But then it does expire in 2029, and there's still going to be.
Right. So when it expires in 2029,
yeah,
I guess 2 questions.
Yes.
What happens when and if it expires in 2029?
Yes.
The first one. And the second one is the new proposed URA going to be attached to a new master finance agreement?
Okay, to answer the second one first, yes, I believe their plan is that the new URA, which would be those 150 acres, would have its own master finance agreement. Likely they're going to ask for their own public improvement fee, probably their, retail sales fee and stuff. So I did just find my little piece of paper that says historical pledged revenue, overlapping taxing entities. In 2022 was 9.6 million, and metro fees were 6 million. So total of 15.7 million for 2022.
And
So
that went where?
well, that goes back to Centerra to help pay that debt and to
Okay,
pay ongoing improvements.
okay,
The PIF, the public improvement fee revenue, that 1.25%, that was almost 8 million. So my understanding is most of that 9 million will cease. So you'll still have the 6 million in metro fees. And according to the MFA, the public improvement fee goes away, and that's 1.8. So, greater minds than mine might understand, how that's going to be paid off once some of these major revenue contributors cease in 2029. That's a lot of debt to think that you're going to pay off between now and then, when it just seems to
right.
be accumulating higher. And I would question, when you're talking about pulling out that 150 acres that's across the street from Target, it seems to me, first of all, that property benefited by some of these public improvement fees, widening 3425. Those dollars that are brought in are going to need to help pay the current debt versus taking on more debt. So,
Okay.
I mean, what is the obligation there?
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds, again, I'm a simple person. So it sounds kind of like the old adage, like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Is that sort of what, in a very simple way, we're looking at with like a potentially new MFA, potentially new URA to deal with that debt? Is that kind of like a simple?
You know what? Yeah, and there's, when you look forward in the rolling calendars, there's language about amending the current MFA.
Okay.
And starting a new MFA for the new property, or really the property that's pulled out, and then used to create a new one. You know, I don't have all the answers.
I
I
know. It's
honestly, I
okay.
have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
One of the documents I went back and found is this was approved, before my first election. It was April of 2017. And because it's referred to quite a bit in the new loan documents, they're talking about the pledged capital revenues and stuff. And so, because the new loan documents were making such a big deal of it, I went back, and I found this pledged revenue. It talks about the LURA, the TIF revenue, the tax incremental. That's where the majority of the property tax is sent to Centerra to help pay for debt and improvements. It says it ends January 20th of 2029. Then it goes, the next category is District 2 Commercial Capital Pledge Agreement. The required mill levy, the debt service mill levy that is determined by District 1, number 1, which is the one that's controlled by the developer, while taking into consider other available, quote, pledged revenues to be imposed by District 2 upon all taxable property of District 2, and that's your commercial property in Centerra, in an amount necessary to pay the principal and interest due of revenue obligations. District number 1 also determines a permitted operating mill levy that can always be imposed up to 20 mills and is not pledged to payment of bonds, and it could exceed said amount depending on the required mill levy. In no event can the required mill levy for debt service and the permitted mill levy for operations be in excess of 72 mills. And then it says specific ownership taxes. The specific ownership taxes remitted to District 2 pursuant as a result of imposition of required mill levy are pledged. So those are the ongoing ways to pay the debt. The metro fees on the commercial buildings,
Okay.
and specific ownership taxes.
So, and we only have a couple minutes left.
Okay, sorry. Let me just real quick say there's
Sure.
a minimum amount of residential that expires in 2029, industrial of 15 mills. And then they're listing here public improvement fee as pledged revenue. And on this, they do not say that it expires in 2029. So we go back to the conflict of documents.
Right. Wow, okay. My
I don't
dog.
think I did anything to make it more clear to people. I mean,
Well, and maybe we'll do a follow-up, but I guess my last question is, with all of this, and I know you don't have all the answers, and I am grateful that you've given us what you have right now. And I know there's a big meeting coming up tomorrow, February 7th.
yeah.
City council meeting. Should folks tune in to see what's going on with the new appointees to the Loveland Urban Renewal Authority Board?
Yes, the way the meeting is set up, the first part of the evening will be our regular meeting. We'll start with public comment at the beginning of the meeting and take care of some city business. And then we adjourn to the LURA, Loveland Urban Renewal Authority, and that's where it's anticipated. We're going to seat 4 new members. And I have questioned, are we doing it properly? So that discussion should take place. And then if it moves forward, then we will seat the 4 new members. And then we're scheduled to have the presentation by 2 attorneys that are both experts in the field of urban renewal authority. One tends to be more in favor of them, and one tends to be more skeptical. So we're going to hear the pros and cons of urban renewal authorities. And then there's planned to be a presentation by Centerra regarding, the project to date. And we'll probably have very, very different views of, progress to date. According to the master finance agreement, pledged revenues were the TIF, that's the property tax from the URA, PIF, the public improvement fee, and metro taxes. So that's what the MFA of 2004 said would be how the debt is paid and how the improvements are paid for. Regional improvements are covered in the master finance agreement. And again, if you go back to that original council, they're giving away a lot of revenue. And the idea was that we would get a lot of improvements, infrastructure improvements, roads and different things. So they classified some of these as regional improvements. Some of this deals with, there's a trigger, and once that trigger is reached, 60% of the net revenue has to go for regional improvements. And we always seem just a little bit shy of reaching that trigger. But the regional improvements are listed in the master finance agreement. And so there are things like I-25 and Crossroads Boulevard interchange improvements, interim I-25 and US 34 interchange improvements. Remember, this goes back to 2004. County Road 5 and US 34 structure, County Road 3E and US 34 structure, the final I-25 and US 34 interchange improvements. And then the last one is any and all other public improvements, which the city, LURA, and CDOT, I believe, is what because they originally CDOT, that to be a regional improvement, CDOT had to be the planning aspect. They had to do the planning of it. Okay. So, there were amendments made, and things like Boyd Lake were changed from a local improvement to a regional, meaning they're meeting their requirement of a certain percentage of the revenue to go to regional.
So I'm getting real simple here. I got my crayons because I got a 7-year-old. So here, can you see that?
Yes.
We have TIF, PIF, metro fees. I know that this is way more complicated than can be explained, but is there any way to interpret how much is going to Loveland and how much is going to Centerra? And I'm not asking for a dollar amount, but I guess I'm just asking how much is being diverted.
The TIF is the property tax inside Centerra, not the individual homes, not your single family homes. That's tax increment finance. So the increase in property value from when you had a farm and now you have an office building, or now you have the promenade. All of that property tax is not going to the city, the county, the school, it's going to pay for those debts and improvements. Public improvement fee, we get none of. Centerra gets 1.25%. We lose 1.25% because we're only charging 1.75 instead of our 3% sales tax. Metro fees, we get nothing of. City of Loveland doesn't. That's 100% going to Centerra. Where they, I think, affect, so the metro fees on your commercial is just going to cost those businesses more money to run a business. And I encourage people to go onto your county assessor site, pick one of the commercial buildings, pick either an office building, a storefront, go in and look at their tax history and look at how much they're paying in metro fees for that
Brilliant.
property.
Brilliant.
How it affects, I think, if we go back to the discussion on metro districts, if you're a homeowner in a metro district, which is separate from Centerra 1 through 5, but say you're Lakes of Centerra or Vandewater or whichever, or one of the other metro districts not in Centerra, doesn't have to be Centerra, you're paying typically significantly more than somebody not in a metro district. You're taking money out of their pocket that they don't have to spend at a restaurant or a store, or a vacation. They just have less money in their hands to spend. People that have an excess of money, maybe that doesn't bother them. A lot of people are not that fortunate, and we live paycheck to paycheck. And if you take an extra $3,000 out of my pocket, well, guess what? Or $500,
Yeah.
so that's how I would say. And then it makes it tough for the schools to pass school bonds because people in metro districts feel like they're being overtaxed.
Definitely. And you explained that so well in our last interview, and the whole idea of backfill. And I'll speak for myself. And we might get cut off at any second. So I was personally a little alarmed to see one of our council members on social media say oh, no, it's great because look up backfill. Backfill's great. So the schools don't lose out. And I thought, I'm grateful that you had educated me to understand that that is something that can be rescinded at any time. And
it does. I mean, imagine you're a property owner in say the Lakes at Centerra, and you pay your property tax, and it looks like you've got a big chunk of money going to the school. Well, it didn't actually go to the school,
right?
But the state as a whole, everybody in the state that pays, Colorado tax is going to pay to make up for that money that got diverted. So those people living in there are almost paying twice.
Right. Which is but to me, again, speaking for myself, it's such a shame because I feel like our youth and our children should probably be at the forefront of policy, not at the back.
And it's not just in Loveland, all over the state, money is diverted and backfilled, but overall, there's still that much less money going into our school system.
Right. Which is
that people think they're paying. People believe that they're, that the schools are flush with money, and it ends up being the per pupil minimum.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jackie. I'm going to wrap up now before we get cut off. Really appreciate you as always. And if we need to answer more questions, we will. Maybe I'll put that up on the Loveland Voices. What other questions do you have for Jackie? And if you're open for Mayor Marsh, and if you're open to that, then we could, we could do this again.
Absolutely. And if you ever want to do a town hall, and I can bring all my documents, because it's hard to find stuff in a few seconds. I mean, I'm surrounded by paper. You can't see it. I'm doing a pretty good job keeping it below the camera.
I can imagine. I also organize that way, in a nest.
Everywhere in my office is paper.
Well, thank you so much for doing all of this for us, and I will definitely follow up.
All right. Well, thank you, Jessica, for what you're doing too. Trying to just bring information to people.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.